Welcome to the Forward One podcast.
Grateful to be here.
And so today we're going to talk about goal setting, which was really what came out of our coaching today.
Right, which is business plan, right? A goal without a plan is a wish, and we're super intentional about making sure we're purposeful and driving action and ultimately driving results. So tell me a little bit about what the difference is between a commitment and a goal.
Right. So just to begin with, the notion of goal, and maybe I should look it up, but the notion of goal, there's an aspect to a goal that is a bit wishful or aspirational. Certainly, we know that commitment is very different. Commitment is the standard which we will not deviate from. So I'm shifting the conversation from goals to commitments, just for starters. And also, oddly enough, when you set that standard as this is, we will not allow our outcome in 2026 to fall below this. That's our commitment. There's no upper limit. And when you set a goal that's somewhat aspirational, then you get towards that goal. Maybe you slow down. Goals can be, oddly enough, limiting. Now, I definitely think goal setting versus not goal setting, I'll take the goal setting all day long. But if we're going to do it, let's do it around commitments. So that makes a big difference.
And that's a floor. That's an absolute minimum that by definition you are committing to. So I think it is really important to create those commitments. And then to your point, great, let's create some goals that are more aspirational, but making sure the commitment is there first and foremost.
Let me jump in a little bit and talk about what is the North Star and really the math of a commitment. And the first thing, whenever we do this with clients or agents, the first thing that I tell them to do is be just brutally specific. Just get as specific as you can. Take whatever you're going to send to us, get super specific, and just know after you send it to us, likely we're going to go back and say, get even more specific.
Why is specificity so important?
It's what tells you exactly what you're going after. So when we had this conversation with phenomenal realtors, one of the things that one of our great realtors said was, you know what, if I could do 15% better next year, I'd be happy. We said, hey, what's your commitment? What's your goal? He said, goal, if I could do 15% more. First of all, 15% more of what? Is that your net or your gross? So he then immediately responded, you know what? Gross doesn't matter to me. It's all about net. I really appreciated that for sure. So that's a bit of specificity. And then also, do you know exactly to the penny what your net was for last year or the last 12 months so that you can pick the forward going 12 months. So that's the math of commitment.
And let me just jump in. The specificity creates objectivity. It doesn't let feelings get into the way, because that's by human nature. We often let our feelings determine what we do or how we respond. Mm-hmm. It creates objectivity, and it creates something that's measurable. So there's accountability in that, right? There's no ambiguity as to whether you did it or didn't do it, or achieved it or didn't achieve it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what drives results. So I love the specificity piece, which is measurability and accountability.
Right. And also the other piece to it was to really, so for example, what he said was, 15 or 20%. So right away, now we get, okay, it's net. Then we know we're going to find out exactly what his net was. We're getting specifics. 15 to 20%, not specific. So we could say, hey, so maybe your goal is 20% more. What's your absolute commitment? Distinguish that for us. And then he said, I am committed to 15% more. So now we find out exactly what he did last year and what is that 15% more.
And that means it's definitively measurable. Now we know what that number was. Then we know what 15% more was. It's all in, as we say, the math.
Exactly.
The data, the math are the driving forces behind all this.
Exactly. And then I would just say two more points on it. And that is, number one, make it personal. There was this thing that we used to talk about as the big why, why is that important to you? And you can get at that very easily. And you just say, whatever, now you got your North Star. It's very concrete. So it's like, let's just say that he had done $1 million net, be huge. And so he is now committing that he will not go under 1,150,000 net. Or 500, therefore 500, you will not go under 575,000 net for the next 12 months. And then the question is that you get to the big why, you take that really specific goal, and then you just go, so that ... And then it's what comes after the so what that gives you the big why. And somebody doesn't necessarily need to have it right then and there, but it is important to get it. So exactly why are you committed to 15% more? It's just, maybe you're committed to personal growth. Maybe you have some real reasons. Oh, you know what? I want to put my kids into private school. I want to take a better vacation. I want whatever it is critically important. And I know whether I'm going to bet on that person hitting that commitment or not by what their why is, but how committed they are to their why. If they are fervently committed to that why, then I'm going to bet on them. Yep.
Love it. And again, a great business plan, I think big picture, compels sustained action. Sustained action, right? So something that once again, you can commit to, that you will perform the actions, right? The lead measures with consistency, day in, day out, right? Per the prescription that the plan created, right? And ultimately sustainability, right? It's all about playing the long game. It's all about the actions you take now that don't bear fruit to some point in the future, and understanding that, I think, is so critical, that there isn't an instant return on your effort, that when you have, a conversation with someone that could be a potential client, it's going to take time to build that relationship, to get a contract perhaps eventually signed, to close a transaction. So I think, again, big picture, it compels sustained action, simplicity, specificity, to your point, which ultimately drives accountability and confidence, right? When it's simple and specific, it gives you more confidence to act with consistency.
You already hit the next thing I was going to say, and maybe you'll give us even a little more detail, because now you have that North Star. And then I would say that's your lagging indicator. That's the thing you're going to get at the end of the day.
Which are the goals, right? That's the lagging indicator, the goals and sort of the results. Go ahead.
Or the commitment.
Yep. Or the commitment. Exactly.
So we're going to take that commitment, then we're going to reverse engineer that. And we're going to say, what are the activities that it takes to hit that commitment? And so that's
called basically lead measures. What are the actions that you can take every day, that you should take every day, that you control, right? It's those lead measures, the actions you control, that are going to drive the results, and they should be, again, simple, clear, concise, and few. And for us, it's really first and foremost about conversations. How many conversations are you having with prospective clients every single day? Right. And I always come back to the quality is in the quantity, right? So as you start to have those conversations, you do it with consistency. Invariably, if you're humble, you're self-aware, and you're willing to get feedback, those conversations will become more and more intentional and purposeful and more effective. Mm-hmm. But you got to start somewhere and start to collect the data to determine, hey, this is working, and I'm going to start to build the foundation.
I think you've done a phenomenal job on really lead versus lag indicators. One of the things that people talk about are KPIs, which stands for key performance indicators. And the top line one is that lag indicator. So now we're going to say 575,000 of net to that particular realtor. And that's going to be your lag indicator. And then
there's not necessarily just one lag indicator that you want to keep them. So, right, there's also, basically gross commission, GCI, can be a certainly a lag indicator, and, number of transactions closed is a lagging indicator, right? Those are the things that we often focus the most on or get the most attention, because those are the results. And once again, arguably more important are the lead indicators, the conversations, the appointments. Those are the things that really are driving the results. How many conversations am I having? How many conversations do I need to have to generate an appointment, right? And then when I go to an appointment, what are my conversion ratios as to when I go to an appointment, how many times do I get the contract signed or not? Those are absolutely KPIs, and they're the ones that we can control with skill and action.
And when you say to me that there can be several lag indicators, as a business consultant, I want to disagree, and say, hey, look, really, what we're really after, what most people are really after are just, what is that net number? And yet I totally get it, because when we were doing something slightly different and we were driving at a level of profitability in our title business, they're running through all these numbers, and now I'm on the receiving end, and I'm the one that needs to be that person that's held accountable. I just said, you know what? I don't want to hear all these numbers. Tell me how many orders I need, right? How many more orders do we need to achieve that level of profitability? And of course, there is a little bit of, it's a little less specific in the sense that, there's a big order, there's a medium, there's a small, whatever, but generally there is that average. And so for me in that instance, I just said, tell me how many more orders we need in the next 12 months. And then I divide that by 12. Turns out not to be that many more orders. So it's like 6 more orders a month. But when they were just talking numbers and, we need a gross title fees of additional, my brain wasn't tracking it as well, because I don't play in that world. So I'm like, hey, how many more orders?
Yep.
And then I got that number back, 6. Now I know how to chase that hard.
Look, I think at the end of the day, the KPIs, the key performance indicators, whether they be leading indicators or lagging indicators, are the things that you want to know, that you can influence or analyze, that can drive the success of your business. So again, certainly net income, right, would be one in real estate. And I definitely would say GCI, gross commission, because someone may have comparable gross commission as someone else, and someone's net income may be dramatically different. 2 people can have $1 million GCIs, and one's netting, 500,000, the other one's netting 200,000. So what's the difference and why, right? Because that gets back into cost structure and so forth. So I would argue that they're both absolutely KPIs, because they can influence the success of your business. Mm-hmm. So Paul, between you and I, we've coached, mentored, and helped so many top agents create their business plan. And one of the things that you always talk to me about is like, where did they get their business as you do that with agents? And what does that do to inform them to be much more purposeful moving forward? So tell us a little bit about that.
So just to begin with, if you ask people where they get the majority of their business, they're going to have a sense, or a good sense, so they think. And one of the things that I've done is ask them to go back at least 2 or 3 years. It depends on their volume. It also depends on the market, because we had a little bit of a weird market. So I want to go back far enough and go back the last 4 years of your deals and just write out the address or whatever it is, the transaction, and where did that business originate from? Where did you get that piece of business? Is it from your sphere? Was it from a particular referral? Was it from a seminar you gave? And I have not had a single person go through that exercise and not come back and be like, wow, I really thought that, I got 70% of my business over here. Really, it turns out it was 40%, or, I thought I got 60% of my business. Really, it was 90%. And it also gives you the ability to decide, because the best way to increase your business, and I'll take a half a step backwards. When we have this person in coaching that says, I want to do 15% more, one of the first things he said is, I'll just work 15% more. But with diminishing returns, maybe it'll even take 20% more. Well, when you're talking to somebody that's already working 10 hours a day, you're like, I want to make 40% more. You're like, great. Just do exactly what you're doing, and then work 14 hours a day instead of 10. Nobody wants that deal. So that brings awareness. And then you go through, and generally where the majority of their business came from, they are efficiently creating. And then they looked down and they were doing, even very productive agent was doing a certain number of full day, half day, first time home buyer seminars, or it was some sort of program like that, like a VA program or something. And they looked back and they thought it was such a great idea. And they looked back and like, wow, in the last 3 years, I think I've got one deal from that. So clearly calling their sphere was what was really making it happen. And then putting more focus on what was already making it happen. So doing really what is in essence a more of, less of.
Right. More of what works and less of what isn't working. And that can be very illuminating and basically tell you something that wasn't part of your intuition.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or I even was coaching a title rep, and the title rep was, they would spend all this time with brand new agents. I'm setting up their farm. I'm helping them with this. I'm helping them with that. And the majority of their business came from, a few clients that were wildly productive. And I'm like, you should either go spend more time with them, or, try and find one or two more clients like that. I think they have 4 clients that were wildly productive and gave them, 3 of them gave them every deal. And the other wildly productive agent gave them sort of like most or half of their deals. I'd like spend time with that other, double down on the people that are already giving you the deal, spend some more time with the one, try to get from a half to all their deals, and then try and add a 5th or a 6th person that gives you that many deals. Because when we went back and tracked how many deals were they getting from the brand new agents, and really I feel like they got something personal from it, which is okay, right. By the way. They're like, I was like, what would it look like if you never talked to a brand new agent anymore? Yeah. And they're just like, I watched all the, wind come out of their sales, and, say, okay, if you want to commit a certain amount of time to non-productive teaching, just call it non-productive teaching in your calendar.
Yep. And it comes back to creating awareness, right? Because the more aware we are, the more purposeful we can be in terms of moving forward. And ultimately, it doesn't mean you need to necessarily work 15% more to do 15% more of your business. You just need to focus on the things that are giving you a greater return on that time and that effort. And that's what that exercise allows them to do.
Yeah, yep. Absolutely. And I also remember, teaching a class, and we were, I would say, what's your commitment for next year? And, everybody's sort of in like, oh, I want to do 10 or 15% more. I want to do 20% more. And then I said, what would stand between you and doing that? And, it was a very smart group. I couldn't get anybody to offer anything. I said, okay, everybody write down your number. And they wrote down their number. So if they were at 200, they wanted to go to 250. If they were at 800, they wanted to go to 950, something like that. I go, okay, now, take that number and add a 0. So the person that was at 200, instead of going to 250, now they're going to 2.5 million. And the person, then there's this stream of things that would stand in their way. One person even said, God will stand in the way of me. I'm like, wow. Suddenly they became an expert at what won't work or what will, what the obstacles are. Another person said, money's not that important to me. And, you couldn't pay me $2.5 million to skip my kid's soccer game. I was like, interesting. Who said you have to skip your kid's soccer game? Yeah. It's like these
all these limiting beliefs. And that's, I always say our greatest obstacle is often the limiting beliefs we have. And that's why when you can surround yourself with others that are doing things at an extraordinary high level, then you can see the possibilities that perhaps you wouldn't even be able to see on your own. So I think, again, the limiting beliefs are just limiting beliefs.
Talk to me about, so now we get this great idea of where we're going to put our effort. There's another way to streamline things, and that's, what you and I would call like a leverage stack.
Sure. Yeah, I'm a huge believer in leverage, right? Leverage is, to me, another way of saying just work smarter. How do you get a greater return on your time and your effort? Because we have limited time and limited effort, right? So how do we maximize that? And I think a great framework that I often coach agents with is prioritize. What are the actions that are going to give you a greater return on your effort, right? And very simplistically, it's like, prospecting, is going to give you a much greater return on your effort than is working on your marketing or your social media, right? Which so many agents fall prey to. They want everything to look great and look perfect. But if you don't have a prospective client, none of that matters. So prioritize, focus on the actions that are going to give you the greatest return on your effort. Automate, right? Use systems, use processes, use artificial intelligence and technology to automate a lot of the things that you're doing that can be done by a system, that can be done by technology, right? A CRM is a great way. Like some people like rely on their memory, they rely to like follow up and follow through, as opposed to putting them into a database management system that allows you to automatically, you set it up and forget it, to follow up and follow through, obviously with some personal touches. That's the automate piece. And then the delegate piece, like, when do you make a hire, right? A great hire can be the greatest form of leverage, right? Because they're people that you've trained well, you've created mutual expectations for, that you can trust, and that they're doing a lot of the actions that you were otherwise doing on your own. And you're maximizing your dollar productivity, right? You're focusing on the things that matter most for you as an agent, which is the relationship building piece and the negotiation piece. And most of the other things can be leveraged. Right. But you always come back to, you earn your right to delegate. So you've got to build the business up enough. It's like lead with revenue to do enough business to be able to afford those things that cost money, particularly the people piece, the delegation piece. But obviously systems also cost some money, usually less. But those things are going to create leverage for you. So you can focus on the things that are giving you the most return on your, effort and time, as we said.
And one of the things you were saying before when we did the coaching was talking about the minimum wage stuff that agents, top agent is still doing, some data entry. They're still doing a little of, these few things. And if you really take that away, then you can
just think when you do an exercise, which I do a lot with a lot of agents, and like let's say they're doing $500,000 of gross commission, and their average price point is $2 million, right? So that's what, 25. That's
50. 50 grand.
Right, 50 grand. Thank you. So they're doing that's 20 deals a year, right? And you break that down into their hourly wage.
10 deals, but that's okay. Right. It's late in the day.
Yeah, sorry. 10 deals.
Let's go $1 million, 20 deals.
$1 million, 20 deals.
Yeah.
And you look at, and you break it down and you call it a 50-hour work week, right? And you look at what that hourly wage is. And then you think about all the things that agent is doing. And so many of them can be automated or delegated for far less than what their time is worth. And I think it's a great exercise because they say, hey, my time is worth several $100s, an hour. And meanwhile, I'm doing things that I could pay someone else to do or create a system for that I could be paying them $30 an hour. And it really sheds light on like, how do I leverage all of those things that are not nearly as dollar productive as my time is worth?
And of course, it's a national podcast, and there's a lot of places where the houses cost a lot less money.
So, all right. So let's, just do the math, like call it a $500,000 home,
Yeah. But my point in that really is that in the places where you have to sell a lot more homes to do that, it forces you to be more, if you're grossing $1 million in LA versus grossing $1 million in Omaha, Nebraska, where a good friend of ours practices real estate, you're a machine.
Yep. And you have to create significant leverage and automation and delegation, because you've got to do that many more units, and you've got to have to your point, a well-oiled machine. And typically in those places, your profit margins as a result of that are going to be less. Right? Because you have to spend money on the systems and the people more readily than someone who only needs to do 10 deals a year at a much higher price point. So that's important to recognize that to learn to leverage, because so many agents are control, and that's what creates their standard of excellence.
Sure.
But as business owners, you need to understand like when to relinquish control on the right things, which allow you to grow a lot more readily.
And if you grow as a leader, then you really can delegate these things, and you can delegate them in a way that makes more sense, even works better than if you were doing it yourself. I'll share one anecdote, and then I actually want to go back to you on another point. But one anecdote is I had the opportunity to work with a guy who was a consultant that changed the course of Keller Williams, according to Gary Keller. Very, very expensive consultant. I did not pay his insane fee. It was a long time ago. He was coming through LA. I had taught his course I'd taken his course from him and taught his course. So he came through, visited us, was visiting anyway, came through our office, and he said, yeah, let me run an exercise with you. And he said, what are all the things? It was about this time of year, many years ago. And we went in the conference room, got on the whiteboard. He said, what are all the things you have to accomplish in the upcoming year? Bring your team in. We did that. We collaborated with this big long list. He said, all right, Paul, you first. Go up to the board and circle all the stuff you love doing. Just the stuff you love doing. And I circled, there's probably 30 things up there. I circled 3 or 4 of them. And he goes, okay, well, what would it look like next year if that's all you did were those things that you love doing? And you're just going to increase your productivity tremendously. And then he was sort of brutal, not a softie, this guy at all. And he just looked at if there were 5 things that I wanted to do out of 40, he looked at me and said, okay, well, your team has to be a master at these other 35 things, or they need to go. You need to get people that will master this. And that was that was interesting. Now, if what you love is the non-dollar productive stuff,
that's a problem.
That's a problem.
And again, when you're doing things that you really enjoy doing, that you're passionate about, you're going to do them far more consistently, which creates far more sustainability. Because I think I'm a huge believer that no plan is worth much of anything if it's not sustainable for you. So having that level of self-awareness to make the commitments that it's going to entail to execute the plan is critical.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you walked right into my question, because you're fit. You're very fit. I'm pretty fit. I always love, I marvel because I've heard people ask you the same question. I've heard you give the same answer every single time. They're like, hey, Josh, what do you do? What do you do to stay so fit? What's your diet and what's your workout plan? And you always answer it the same way. And that answer is,
I'm happy to share it with you, but realistically, the likelihood that you're going to be able to execute it with consistency is not particularly high. Therefore, it's not really that valuable for you, right? Because I'm extremely regimented in how I eat and how I work out. And I've done it consistently for decades. So I know it's sustainable for me. It's second nature, but I don't think most people would be able to sustain it. So I typically, I'm happy to share it with them, but I'm just, again, let's figure out what works for you, that you can do it with consistency. And that's going to be the best plan for you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what I'll say, part and parcel to that, is your calendar, right? Because again, the greatest plan is meaningless without the ability, the will, and the discipline to execute that plan, mm-hmm. right? And if it's not in your calendar, meaning the actions that you can control, those lead measures that we discussed earlier, are not reflected in your calendar in time blocks, then the likelihood it's going to come to reality is very slim. Mm-hmm. So I always say, I can look at your calendar and tell you how successful you're going to be. Mm-hmm. Because it should be very clear as to what you need to do in order to achieve your goals. And it should be absolutely reflected in that calendar. I live by my calendar. It doesn't exist if it's not in your calendar. Mm-hmm. And those that are super intentional about that and make sure everything is reflected in that calendar and that they have the discipline and the accountability to follow that calendar is critically important. Mm-hmm. So those lead measures and those activities need to be absolutely in that calendar.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I fall back on every time we hit this subject is that people greatly overestimate what they can accomplish in the short-term spurts. This is the difference between the predictable, sustained energy over time versus the spurts and the sprints, and people overestimate what they can and should be able to accomplish in the short term, and really underestimate what they can accomplish in the long term. And, exercise is a very funny example of that because, maybe I get all fired up or somebody gets, all fired up about exercise. And it's obvious that, if you then went to the gym and worked out at the gym for 8 hours, it's not going to be nearly as effective as if you went every other day for an hour. That's 16 days. All you're going to do is get injured and sore and whatever it's, from that one day. And that's a great metaphor for that. And we talked about a guy who worked with us and he had a good business. He had been at it for years, and all he did was have 15 live conversations per day. You know what? I think actually it was only 10.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I want to up it because in our coaching, we were talking to Andrew, who does 25 a day, but those are cold calls. This guy was just calling his fear. He had the luxury of being in business for a long time. But what happens naturally with agents is they'll spend time lead generating, then they'll get real busy, and then they'll stop lead generating. And then this is how you really, you guarantee the ebb and flow of your business that way. And what this guy used to do, and he would get very busy, but he would still make sure that he had 10 live, purposeful conversations about real estate before he left the office, 5 days a week. And every once in a while, I would, I'd stop by the office late at night and there, he's an older guy and he'd be like, he's at the office at 10 o'clock on the phone. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, oh, dude, I got busy and then I got lazy and then I got distracted. And, my wife made dinner at 7 o'clock and, I canceled that. And I'm here because I've only still made I've had 9 live conversations. And other days, the first, you make 12 calls to get 10 conversations. Yeah. And some days you just,
and it gets back to do the priorities if you can first thing in the day, right? That is so important because that's going to make you less susceptible to distractions and procrastination and so forth. Again, set yourself up to succeed. And this all becomes habitual if you want it to be, right? And habits create automation, create, efficiencies and productivity, the right habits. So I think it's important to make sure those right things are reflected in the calendar. And the more you can front load them in the day, the more successful you're likely going to be because of just that. Because the unexpected is to be expected. So factor that into your schedule and calendar, and that is what will set you up to succeed.
Right. And it really is true. When you do the most important things first, then the most important things get done. Fitness is very important to me. Being healthy is very important to me. And I just don't want to work out in the morning, so I don't do it. And guess what? Stuff comes up and I miss my workout. But that's also why I put my intention at working out 7 days a week when really all I need is 4 or 5. So
again, goal versus commitment versus goal.
Yeah,
right?
That's
goal
correct.
7, commitment maybe 6 or 5.
That's right. That's right. And I went back. I actually, I almost do nothing other than hot yoga, but it's pretty extreme. And I went back to use the program that they have. And I'm like, let me just see what went on the last 3 years. And I had over 600 recorded, because sometimes I'll go and they won't record it because I'll walk by, you get the membership and sometimes I'll go to other places like when I'm traveling, but I had over 600 hot yoga classes at my home studio in the last 3 years. So I know I did at least 200 a year, and that produces a certain result, and that the spurt is never going to get for you.
Yep.
I'll give you one more example, and we'll close it out because I think we've hit we've really hit the things that are necessary, and that really is the goal setting through. And I had a consulting conversation with a woman, and she looked back and she really, I did the exercise with her of where does most of your business come from? And most of it came from her sphere. Most of it came from past clients. And then I was like, what's your retention rate? Like how many times is a former client using someone else. And she was so good at it that like really pouring more time and energy into past clients. That's where she got most of her business. Pouring more energy into her past clients was not going to get her much more because her retention rate was like unheard of. She's like, it almost never happens. I can remember this one time a client did and I was furious and, like she was on it.
Yep.
So that was the one time I didn't really go back to the same well. And then I looked at where did some of your new business come from? And it turned out that some of her new business that she did several things to get new business. Really the only thing that was really effective was networking. And she's like, oh, that's great. I love networking. I'm like, great. So for next year, how many networking events this is where you get that specificity, right? How many networking events are you going to go to? And also I asked her, how many contacts are you going to make at the networking event? And getting even more specific, what exactly constitutes a contact? What creates that win? And we had it like completely, and it took the conversation because she wasn't coming out with it without all the questions. So we decided that a contact only happened when you had a live conversation with somebody that involved real estate. You let them know what you did. You got their contact information, not give them yours. Right. You can give them yours, but you got theirs because you just give your business card out, forget it.
You're in control.
And also what I refer to as getting the homework, which is some reason to follow up with them. And it does not have to be real estate related. So for example, they need a restaurant recommendation or, oh, great. And then as soon as you have a meaningful conversation, you talk about real estate, you tell them what you do, you get their information and you get a piece of homework off to the next. And she agreed that she would make 10 of these contacts per event. Okay, great. Is that going to be hard for you? Easy for you? She goes, no, I appreciate the purposefulness of this, but I can definitely do 10. Okay, great. How many do you want to do in 2026? And she said, I want to do 24. Which to me sounds like a lot, to be honest with you, right? But I'm like, okay, is that you're really like, is this goal or is this commitment? She's like, no, I'm telling you, like, and coming from her, I believe it. I got it.
Yeah.
And what I told her to do was get out your calendar, okay, and get back to me. I want you to get back to me. And what I want you to do is I want you to schedule in advance these networking events so that you're looking for them. Which are the ones that you're going to? Oh, this one happens once a month.
It's in the calendar.
That's going to be. And I told her to schedule. She wanted to do 2 a month, 24 for the year. I said, does it matter? No, 24, it's good. Okay. Schedule 3 a month. And the reason why I said that was I know for sure if you schedule 24, you're going to end up at the end of the year with less than 24 or really resentful. And because what would happen to me is, hey, I have a good friend that came in from out of town, but I'm so relentless with my commitment, right? That, I can't see my friend until I get the 10 names and, numbers. I'm just be like angry about networking. So instead, what I would do is I would have 3. And then if nothing comes up, then I would go to 3. Now I'm ahead 1.
Yep.
If nothing comes up, then now I'm at 6, right?
Yep.
Now the friend comes into town or guess what? I just don't feel like it. I'm still hitting my commitment.
Yep.
So that's the goal setting through. And the goal setting through is I put down 36 when my absolute bottom line hard commitment is 24. And that I think for people more like me, that is the absolute guarantee.
And it's
success.
another way of it's connecting the goal setting through with goals relative to commitments, which just makes me think, make sure ideally you have both.
Mm-hmm.
You have commitments and then you have goals and they're relative to one another. And therefore the commitment is the baseline. So what was once like the 24 was initially maybe a goal to her now becomes a commitment because the goal is now 36.
Yes.
And the commitment is 24 and it enhances the probability that it pretty much guarantees the 24 is going to come to fruition.
And look at what we've talked about today. And that is, the leading and the lagging indicators and all this sort of thing. And you got this woman that has this fabulous practice and most of the business is coming from her past clients. She's got a good business. Her retention's so high, she's not going to grow her business by doing more of that. But she had these 3 or 4 other things she was doing. We focused on the one, that she got real results from. And if she does, which I believe she will, and she hits her commitment, which I believe she will, because it's structured for her to win, that is 24 events with 240 new solid contacts into her database. I'm betting on her, and that's why I think today's episode is really good, and I appreciate it.
Love it, man.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.